Hi, I am Jens Emil Grønbæk from Aarhus University, and this talk is about proxemics and cross-device interaction. The research is done in collaboration with co-authors Mille, Peter, Jo, and Marianne from Aarhus University, and Kenton from Microsoft Research. Designing for flexible use of space is one of the key challenges when supporting co-located collaborative work, and it is among the core interests in research on cross-device interaction. Today's mobile devices, for instance, laptops and smartphones, enable groups of people to arrange in many different configurations around a table. But they currently also lack support for spontaneous sharing across devices. And this constrains our flexibility in social interaction. To address this problem, we present a design perspective for supporting flexibility. And we demonstrate it via 3 prototypes of cross-device interaction. Slam to share for content sharing by slamming the table, stick to share for content sharing via interactive stickers, and finally show to share for control sharing by showing QR tags on screens. Several prior systems for cross-device interaction draw upon proxemics for detecting proximity, but we demonstrate a different approach to proxemics beyond proximity detection, where we specifically focus on key insights in the theory for supporting flexible use of space. Proxemics theory sensitizes us to the interplay between people and artifacts. And through this lens, we consider not just the technologies themselves, but how they work together with the physical environment to frame social interaction. I'll first talk about how proxemics has been adopted previously and what is new about our perspective. I'll explain our research approach, and then I'll focus on the design of one prototype, Slam to Share, to show that our perspective is operational for design. We contribute 3 design sensitivities, and I'll focus on how Slam to Share addresses each one of them. As I mentioned earlier, research on cross-device interaction often draws upon proxemics theory. The theory originates from Edward Hall, and it is the study of how people use space to enact social relations, for instance through interpersonal distance. It has inspired a framework for Ubicom systems known as proxemic interaction that focuses on detection of spatial relations between people and devices. Generally, the approach is to enable cross-device interaction by detecting aspects of proximity, such as patterns in distance and orientation. Often the systems also rely on fixed external sensing infrastructure. Now, we argue that proximity detection in this way also constrains flexibility in social interaction. In contrast, we pose the question, how can proxemics inform design of cross-device interaction to support flexible social interaction? Proxemics theory, in fact, contains important insights when it comes to designing for flexibility. We highlight 3 insights that have received less attention, in particular for design of cross-device interaction. These have been identified in the literature, but are also based on the design research we have done. Our contribution is to highlight these aspects of proxemics as design sensitivities and demonstrate through proof of concept how to operationalize them. Before explaining the design sensitivities, let me briefly explain our research approach. We have focused on the process of designing, following the tradition of research through design, where designs are informed by theory and empirical observations. So a small disclaimer, this is not your traditional system plus user study. Instead, we have developed design sensitivities through the integration of empirical, theoretical, and experimental work in the following way. We conducted a field study in an open space for student group projects, analyzing their collaboration practices through the perspective of proxemics. This has informed several design experiments with prototypes of cross-device interaction techniques. In the paper, each prototype exemplifies how to adopt each of the sensitivities for designing interactions, but for the talk I'll focus on Slam to Share. In the paper we use Edward Hall's terminology of fixed and semi-fixed features for describing shared physical space. For instance, a wall is fixed, whereas a table is semi-fixed because it can be moved. This distinction is useful in understanding the properties of different artifacts when it comes to enabling and constraining social interaction. We can observe, for instance, that the table is a semi-fixed feature of group work that has certain consequences for sharing. The table surface enables placing our laptops on it, like shown here, but it also constrains how we can view contents together. For instance, here a student must rotate the laptop away from himself for the rest of the group to see the screen. The idea of Slam to Share is to exploit the social meaning of the spatial relationship between people, devices, and tables. The devices running Slam to Share jointly detect 2 consecutive slams on a table surface, and this sets up a digital sharing relationship between the devices. Let's see it in action. So in this scenario, Alice, Bob, and Eve want to share a slide deck to start collaboratively editing a presentation. Their individual phones and laptops are connected via their personal user accounts, but they still need to establish a connection across each other's devices. Alice creates a slide deck. They all place their phones on the table, and as you saw, Alice can pound the table twice to establish the connection. Now they all have access to the same document and can start editing it on their laptops. Now this was the basic interaction. I'll now explain the details in the interaction design to illustrate our design sensitivities. The first design sensitivity is to incorporate fixed and semi-fixed features of the environment. Slam to Share incorporates tables in the interaction technique, and this way the table defines the bounded area for sharing. The second sensitivity is to enable flexibility in interpersonal distance and orientation. And notice in this clip how Bob can move away from the group space while his phone is still opted in. This shows the flexibility of action when the sensing is based on explicit interaction with the devices and not implicit detection of distance and orientation between people. Finally, the third sensitivity, support multiple alternative manipulations with the same effect. Essentially, it means that a system can enable multiple physical ways of interacting to achieve the same outcome. Slam to Share, for instance, supports 2 distinct ways for users to opt out of sharing. Bob from the scenario can move between different group tables for sharing, and opting out here is supported simply by picking up the phone from the table. But you can also opt out by flipping the phone face down. And supporting these alternative ways of interacting enables users to opt out while having the flexibility to sit and move in the way that suits them. So those were the 3 design sensitivities demonstrated via Slam to Share, and in the paper all 3 prototypes address each of the design sensitivities. So as a small appetizer for the paper, here's the argument with Show to Share. It supports control sharing for presentations via QR tags, and changing the size of the QR tag shifts the distance from which it can be scanned. This supports variability in the social spatial configurations of presenters and audiences. It also supports multiple alternatives by providing different ways of showing the QR tags, depending on whether you want to share only with the co-presenters or with the large audience. And this leads to my conclusion. We have shown how to operationalize proxemics beyond proximity detection. While the concept of proxemic interaction is focused on detecting spatial relations, we have demonstrated a different perspective focused on enabling flexible social spatial relations. I've demonstrated our contribution of 3 design sensitivities via examples from the paper. For instance, in Slam to Share, relations between people's devices are defined by the boundaries of a table. In this interaction, people can flexibly organize themselves with different distance and orientation depending on the situation at hand. And we've seen 2 examples of how multiple alternatives for the same action also enables more flexibility in the user space. For more details and examples, please read the paper. Thanks for listening.